Good morning from a very windy Riverton this morning. Thanks for joining us. It is October 17th. This is our weekly Riverton Live, our weekly town hall into the FCC and other places regarding LPFM and other things. And I think right now I'm wondering why I'm hearing myself coming back and I should not be. Okay, stand by here, kids. We got to, it is October 17th. All right, I think we fixed the problem. Or maybe we didn't. Oh dear. Fun times, I tell you, folks. Fun times. Yeah, I think we fixed the problems. It's not live. It can't be live, unless there's problems. And so yeah, we've always got something brewing. I am monitoring the chat, so feel free to pop in questions, comments, insults, whatever you want to pop in at the chat, on the chat window. A couple things that just happened overnight that call for some attention. I just want to acknowledge the passing of Elijah Cummings, who's the congressman from the 7th District here in Maryland. I'm putting all politics aside and where you are on the current events regarding the president. We're just not going to go there. But I will say that he was definitely a very outspoken person here in the state of Maryland who was really fighting for and raising awareness of the situation that is going on in the Baltimore area. He is very highly respected on both sides of the aisle, and he will definitely be missed here in Maryland. He was 68. Apparently he had been out on health-related issues since early September, and unfortunately that's what happened. And so we are down one in the House now with the loss of Cummings from Maryland. Also, too, we just received word of the death of Bob Kingsley. Bob Kingsley is a major name in country radio, and did a countdown show, the American country, I think it was the American Country Countdown, with Bob Kingsley. He dies he was 80, and apparently he's been fighting cancer. He's been fighting bladder cancer for a while now. So unfortunately, we got to open this up on a couple of sad notes this morning. So tributes to the families and friends of Elijah Cummings and Bob Kingsley. All right, let's get down to some business here this week. Let's talk about renewals. Here's where we're at right now. 158 out of 186 in Florida and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. That accounts for 85% of all the applications that were filed. Actually, 85% of all the LPFMs. So if you recognize any of the call letters on this list and you know how to get a hold of these folks and, remind them that they either need to file or they need to do the right thing, and if they're not going to be continuing to operate, then just notify the FCC to cancel the license. Actually, LMS now makes it easier to cancel a license. There is a license cancellation mode in LMS. And for those of you who who are responsible for your LMS FRN passwords, it's more important than ever to make sure that you keep your passwords secure within your own organization, to make sure that other staff members can't do things that you really don't want them to do. Now, of course, if somebody was to file a license cancellation through LMS and it was done without authority, you should be able to easily get that back in the reconsideration period. So, just keep a watch on things. Also, keep a watch on FCC.today. That is really one of your best resources for keeping up to date with what's going on at the FCC, and especially if you're concerned about applications being filed by other folks, other stations in your city that may impact you. That's a perfect place to watch. We finally fixed some issues with FCC today where it comes to the real-time updates. In the past, we had a problem where we could only get 100 applications out of LMS real time at one time, and that includes applications that were filed that day, and there were and also included applications that actions have been taken on, and especially when the renewals were coming up. Not all the renewals were posting to FCC today, and that was the reason why. We fixed that problem now, so it actually can go out now about 500 before it quits. And so anything from that day will show up in the real time in LMS, in FCC today from LMS, as we are moving towards a more LMS dependent environment. One of the things we are working on right now is getting the real-time applications that are filed during the day on an existing facility. We were trying to get those to actually reflect on the FCC on the FCC data page. So that way, what will happen is that if let's say somebody files an application at 9 o'clock in the morning for a modification, we're hoping that by 9:20. Amount of engineering and other information there. So that way it shows up in real time. We're really, and let's see, good morning to Cullen James, or is that James Cullen, and Brock. Good morning to both of you, and glad to have you on board. Let me see what comments are here from Cullen James. I was recently given a price quote on antenna space in southern Pennsylvania for a low power transmitter antenna, trying to get my ducks in line for the next window opening. I already purchased a building for the cause, which I am currently sitting on. Would I still need to file for a building permit after already securing those things? You would need to check with your city or county on that, and you need to check with your city or county on that, and see what their rules are as far as building permits and such. And we're actually finding out that we have a case in Los Angeles right now where a city agency gave initial permission for a tower to be constructed, just to turn around and pull that away from somebody. And now we have we have a station off the air because of that. We're trying to move them. We just put in a very interesting waiver request. We're going to be testing we're testing the LCRA in this too by proposing 2 LPFM stations less than 24 kilometers apart, but are separated due to intervening terrain. So this is an issue that we feel is not addressed by the Local Community Radio Act, and is an issue that is that we feel that there would be no statutory impediment for the FCC to do anything about. It's also an issue that was brought up and was kind of rejected in the MB Docket 19193. We're in the process of bringing that back. I'm going to talk about MB 19193 here in just a little bit. And okay, great. The only reason I ask is because I heard the FCC requires a building permit before licensing, apparently. Not exactly. If somebody calls you out on your application because they really don't want you to be there, or whatever reason, and if they say that because you didn't have the necessary permits, either the station is not on the air, or it was not built per the construction permit, or you didn't have site assurance. And really, the FCC does not get too involved with local building and zoning issues. However, we have seen it come up where the FCC has. So that's a very sticky situation. But again, I don't see that being an issue unless somebody complains. If somebody complains and files an informal objection or a petition to deny against your application, that's what we're looking at. Now, keeping in mind too that we are still probably several years out of a LPFM window. Right now I am pushing for the next window to be the non-commercial reserve band window, which would be for full power stations from 88.1 to 91.9. And the reason for that is so that way the full service stations, which would be primary, would get their dibs first, and then the secondary LPFM stations, where there will be some newly available channels below 92 in some areas, because if the FCC moves ahead with the complete elimination of the Channel 6 protection requirements that they're talking about in 19193, that will open up channels for new LPFM stations down below 92 in some areas. But what I don't want to see happen is I don't want to see LPFM go in first, and they start ganging up on some of these below 92 channels, just to turn around and have another window come in to pick up those, another window for the full service stations that will come in there and displace all those LPFM applications or LPFM stations. I don't want to see that happen. The FCC originally wanted to do LPFM, then non-com, and I said no, we need to do non-com first, then LPFM. Keeping in mind that in the non-com window, they won't be the full service non-com stations would not be able to go above 92. That is still sacred ground. There is activity going on there, which I'll be talking about here in just a moment with Auction 106. All right, let's let's see here. Let's move forward. Charlottesville. For those of you who are following the issues in Charlottesville with the 5 LPFMs and Saga Communications, the last that we've heard right now is that the different stations there have obtained different counsel, and there is a general understanding right now that the deadline for these stations, the LPFMs, to file oppositions to Saga's, or Tidewater as they're called there, their petition to deny their renewals will be on October 25th of 2019, so about a week away there. And based on the pleading cycle rules for petitions to deny, replies are due by November 14th. November 14th of 2019. So that's what's happening there in Charlottesville. So hopefully we'll have some more information next week, late next week, in regards to the into Charlottesville. We're still working some bugs in LMS. If you go to recnet.com, there is a look on the left-hand side. There is a link there that says LMS bug list. These are our collected bugs that we have. The main thing is if you're filing an application in LMS, make sure for an LPFM modification, make sure that you're including a screenshot of the height above average terrain page and the FM power pages from the FCC website, so that way you can justify the power that the station is operating at, especially if it's over 30. We're finding that the little built-in tool is not calculating things correctly. In most cases, it is calculating just based on the elevation. I had an LPFM did an application the other day where the height was the height above ground was like 9 meters. The height above average terrain was about 16. However, because of the elevation, because it was a higher elevation area overall, the LMS system gave it a 1 watt ERP when it should have been entitled to 100. So these are the things you got to watch for if you are doing your own LMS filings. These are issues that are have been addressed with the FCC. This is also bringing in some issues with the archive and real-time data that we're getting from LMS right now. If you go on to fccdata.org, you're going to find that some of the LPFM stations where there are that were done in LMS are just completely looking wacky in the system right now, and that is an FCC issue. They just don't have all their ducks in a row on this, and this is what happens when you give it over to a third party. Then they really have screwed a lot of things up, and they didn't test this. And the interesting part was that months ago I said to the FCC, listen, I want to make sure that this goes out right to everybody. I am willing to do test cases. If you want to give me a sandbox environment, if you want to give me a test environment for example, what the developers are using, I will be more than happy to go into a test environment and run test cases that don't go out to the live system just to see how the system responds, reacts, so that way we can build an issues register. This is what I used to do for a living. I used to do this for a living in the telecom industry many years ago. And this is what I would do, is I would write test cases, and then I would do what's called user acceptance testing, where they would give me access to the development environment. I represented the client, which in this case was the organization that was going to be using these enhancements, and saying, listen, we need we need to go in there and make sure that everything works so we can sign off on it. Otherwise, it goes back to the developers, goes back and gets fixed. No, what we're doing here is we're rushing to market, and now we've got a system that is loaded with bugs because people forgot about LPFM. Make sense? I don't think so. Anyway, just heard yesterday on the radio for People Call that apparently there's also an issue with pleadings, like petitions to deny and formal objections, their responsive filings and such like that. If they are hand filed at the FCC, so if an attorney goes down to 12th Street, goes to the secretary's desk and hand files it there, it's not always showing up in time on the systems. It's also not generating anything, and we had the same problem with CDBS. But at least in CDBS, it would eventually show up in a correspondence file. And from my understanding is what they're doing with this is they're actually amending the application and adding the attachment on there, which is kind of silly. They're also doing that, I've noticed, with denial letters. So like if you file something in LMS and the FCC denies it and they send you the letter, normally in the past these letters would go into what's called the correspondence file. LMS doesn't have a correspondence file, so what they're doing is they're attaching it onto the end of the actual application. This is just going to make things harder for us, and especially since we've been, over the years, we've been tracking the letters that go into the correspondence files, and we don't have that kind of ability with LMS, so we are really losing a lot of ability here, and the FCC doesn't seem to address it. We still don't have ownership report raw data, and that's a big issue, especially with everything that's going on right now with broadcast ownership. And as we go into the next window, especially LPFM, that data is used so we can verify who has attributable interest somewhere else, and such like that. So, those are the things, we want to make sure that everybody's following the rules. And so that's where we're at on that. Okay, let's talk briefly about MB Docket in 19193. This is the LPFM FM radio service technical rules. Some various rules that are being proposed, such as the use of directional antennas towards international borders, the expansion of the distance that you'd be able to move as a minor change, and probably the big one on this one is the elimination of all requirements by reserve band broadcast stations, whether you're LPFM, whether you're a translator, whether you're a full service, as long as you're on 88.1 to 91.9, as far as protecting Channel 6 TV stations. That's going to be the big contested issue, I think, coming up in this. We are in a situation right now. Right now, the due dates are up there right now, the 21st of October, which is next Monday, for the comments, and reply comments due on November 4th, 2019. One of the issues that we ran into was that following the publication of the filing deadline date in the Federal Register, the FCC took over a week to publish the public notice announcing the comment deadline period. See, that's the way that it works, is that the comment deadline periods are done pretty much like 30 days after the deadline is 30 days after the day of publication in the Federal Register, and then the replies are due 2 weeks later. And the FCC took a week from the time that it was that the Federal Register was published to the time that they made the public notice. Mainly because it turned out that there was staff at the NAB radio show in Dallas, which took place in that period of time. So the FCC was late. I did have to remind staff that they needed to get this out, and well, they got it out 8 days later. Because of that, REC Networks has filed a motion to extend time on MB Docket 19193, citing the late publication of the public notice, citing also the fact that there were two major radio events that took place in the period between the Federal Register publication and now, and I'm talking, of course, about the NAB show in Dallas, as well as the Grassroots Radio Conference that just ended this past weekend in Rochester. So there were two major events where the stakeholders would be, and the idea, we needed to, we needed some extra time in there. Also, too, there's a couple very big issues in there that need analysis. The rejection of LP 250. the rejection of translator relief, the Channel 6 elimination. These are big issues, and they need further consideration. And, you know, we've done some analysis, and, you know, and I figure, you know, we figure, you know, this is where we're at on that. So right now we have requested that. That request went in yesterday. I'm not sure if the FCC will, I'm pretty sure the FCC will act on it by Monday. But for those of you who are planning to file comments, you know, please do so by these dates for right now, unless you hear otherwise. Unless you hear otherwise, these are the magic dates. October 21st for comments, November 4th for reply comments. And please, we need to bring back LP 250 as a further notice of proposed rulemaking. We don't need it decided in this proceeding on this report and order, but we need to get it back in so that way we can get a full record, both comments and reply comments, on a specific low power FM 250 watt proposal. So that's what we need to do. That is really what we need to do. If you need, here's the information on how to file. And we get a lot of questions about this. How do you file in the electronic comment filing system? It's very simple. You go to that URL above, fcc.gov/ECFS, that's electronic comment filing system, /filings, fcc.gov/ECFS/filings. Under proceedings, look for 19-193. That's 19-193. And that's where you can go to file for, to show your support for LP 250 and some of the other issues that are being discussed in that proceeding. Again, for right now, unless we hear otherwise, comment period closes on Monday. So that's where we're at there. Auction 106. You may have heard some buzz about this over the past couple days. The FCC has put out a notice proposing some of the ground rules coming up for the Auction 106 window. As far as how this is going to impact LPFM, the impacts at first will be minimum, because these allotments are already out there. They're already in the database. They're already being protected by LPFM stations. The brief of the matter is that when somebody wants to add a full power station to a community, they first have to file a petition for rulemaking to get that frequency and that allotment added to a particular community. So there's a process that we go through where we have to demonstrate that there is a need for it. It does come up to a public notice, and any competing proposals would be entertained at that time. But if the FCC decides, okay, this is good, we're going to amend the table of allotments and add this community and this frequency, and they add, you know, you're adding a specific channel and class to the table of allotments in 73-202 of the rules, and then so then what happens is eventually is the FCC will go through that, will go into 73-202, look at all the vacant allotments for commercial. And then what they'll do is they'll take those and put those up for auction. And that's what's going to be happening here next April with Auction 106, is that they're going through all the rulemaking petitions, as well as any canceled FM licenses, including a really high-profile one this time around. Sacramento, California is on the list right now. There is an allotment for a really big one. That's Channel 300 Class B out of Sacramento, And if those of you remember the story about a few years ago with a station called KDND, I think they went. I think they were known on the air as The End. They had a contest where they had a contest called "Hold Your Wii for a Wii," and the contest resulted in the tragic death of one of the participants, and they, and one of the participants there, and after a while, Entercom decided, okay, we don't want, okay, we'll pay the ultimate punishment on this. We're canceling the license. Because what happened is that there was questions on whether Entercom was still qualified to be a commission licensee, especially since they had a possible merger in the works and such. So they just decided, okay, we're just going to give up the license. Forget it. We're just giving it up. We give up. We quit. That's what they did. And that channel is now available. Opening bid on that one is $100,000. I expect that one to go into the millions. I expect it to go into millions. And we'll see where that goes. But what's going to happen is that first of all, because as I mentioned before about the table of allotments and stuff like that, those frequencies, those channels, and those particular reference locations are already allotted out. They're already reserved. So any LPFM stations over time, if you were going into databases and looking to see if a certain channel is available, channel search tools like REC's My LPFM, Prometheus's are free, and the FCC Channel Finder would have taken those into consideration and showed those as unavailable channels. But what's going to happen though is that if you have an LPFM station that is in that little, what I call the yellow area, the area where your LPFM station is legal, but you're not far enough away where the FCC says, oh, you're not going to get any interference. That if you're in that area, there's still a possibility that when this FM station finally actually comes on the air, that you may get interference or you may get noise floor. Now, of course, you should have been warned about this when you've originally filed, especially, like I said, if you were in one of the yellow areas, if you were a yellow status, as we call it here, then yeah, you should have received that warning. And we definitely give those warnings out. We give those warnings of possible interference. Our tool even gives warnings of possible HD hijack. That's a different topic. We'll talk about that another time. But so those are some of the things you got to worry about with that. Also, too, an FM station can move if somebody wins that channel, they can turn around and move it somewhere else. Normally the move can only be done to a location and on a channel that would be otherwise mutually exclusive with the current facility. And so that means more than, contour overlap like it is for non-commercial and for translators. So, I mean, you could move from one end to the other. If those two facilities cannot be placed normally, they're considered mutually exclusive. So there is some ability to move there, and definitely be expecting some of these auction allocations to move, because most of them are in very unlikely places that there would be any kind of a marketability for these stations. So, I mean, we're definitely going to the bottom of the bowl here on a lot of these with various podunk places and such. So, but there are a couple good ones in there. Coalinga, California's in there. Was it Ludlow and was it Amboy? I think Amboy or Essex, California, was in there. If you wanted to do a, if you had this pipe dream to do a radio station along Old 66 in California, the old Route 66 there, especially that little area south of I-40 that trails off into its own little area, which in my opinion was the inspiration for the Disney movie Cars. That is, there's a couple of Class B, I think a B and a B1 along that whole entire I-40 corridor. Now, unlike the I-15 corridor, the I-40 corridor is not really as much traveled because I-15 goes to Vegas, I-40 goes to Needles. Okay, so, but if you've always dreamed about having a radio station in the middle of nowhere that might actually reach the traveling public, there's a couple of very cheap allocations. I think they're going for like $1,000 or $1,500 to start off with. So there we go. Let's see. Brock says, I received a visit from a sales rep from our local PBS public radio. 2 full power non-coms. They presented a full media kit with audience data and emailed a full rate card. Did talk about non-commercial and use sponsorship language, but just looked like a typical media kit. Yeah, and see, that's the thing. And see, in this case, a couple big differences here between here and Charlottesville. First of all, in full power, you are allowed to own more than one station. In full power, you are allowed to have local marketing agreements. You are allowed to have management agreements. You are allowed to have a lot of these things. You just can't do commercials. And the big issue with Charlottesville, the biggest issue with Charlottesville is obviously the commercials. I mean, if those stations ran those commercials, then they need to be treated like any other LPFM or any other full power non-com that has in the past run commercials. And in the case of LPFMs, we've just seen it recently with Santan. Each station would need to go on sign a consent decree with the FCC, pay a small fine. In the case of Santan, it was $1,500, and then go on to a compliance program. And okay, so that's fine. That they should expect. The issues with the concerns over the co-op for the facilities, I see absolutely no problem with what the LPFMs are doing. There's nothing wrong with using a single corporation to manage a shared facility for use by the independent LPFMs. The issue that I do have, though, is with the Experience Radio LLC, and I do have questions, and hopefully we will see the answers to those questions in the oppositions that are due on the 25th. So we just have to stay tuned on that one and see where we can go. We'll have more information about the Auction 106 as time comes up. Again, it's not scheduled until next year, until April of next year. Right now, the FCC is just setting some ground rules and such. And feel free to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. And also feel free to drop your questions into the chat. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about whatever's on your mind here. Feel free to do that in the chat. The next FCC meeting is coming up on October 25th. That is a Friday. Normally these meetings are on Thursday. This one's on a Friday. So Friday, October 25th, these are the various items that are up for consideration. The only media item on there is the possible repeal of a very old broadcast regulation that addresses antenna sighting and goes back to the early days of FM radio and TV, where if there is if one broadcaster has the primo site in town, that they are required to share that site with other broadcasters, other competing broadcasters. That is an archaic rule that goes back to many years, long before long before the days of American Tower, SBA, and Crown Castle. Now there, I'll say it that way. That's really the only media issue on here. The rest of these are wireless related and telecom related issues. And then we have a cable programming issue there with Charter and AT&T, and I believe that is for the state of Massachusetts. So those are the issues that are on the agenda. That's going to be next Friday. We're going to carry that meeting here live through the Facebook Live. We won't be on YouTube that day. Also, too, we'll be doing our normal pre-show on that. So we'll be up a half hour before the meeting. So we'll be up at 10 a.m. and taking you into the meeting at 10:30, and then we may stick around for a little bit afterwards. Like I said, there's nothing really major in media going on this one, so we should be, so we'll see if we need to stick around after that. And we'll also carry the press conferences, too, and everything that normally happens on meeting day. So, yeah, so that's what's going on. Also, too, that means there'll be no Thursday town hall next week. There will be no Thursday live from Riverton. It will be postponed until Friday. So, no 2 days in a row for me. Between family, the work that I need, the work that I do to keep food on the table around here, what's going on right now in the regulatory world right now with 3 notices of proposed rulemaking out there, and also with all this LMS craziness going on. I have been super busy lately. Please be patient with me if you're waiting to hear back from me on things. Amateur radio has always been a very strange place. And if you've ever tuned across the bands, but the nice part about it is that it is one of the places where any citizen of this country can get a license and get on and use a radio in a non-broadcast manner. I mean, unless you're K1MAN. But this also brings out some of the strangest people, Art Bell. And we're starting, and of course you got the folks that are really into conspiracy theories and such like that, and this kind of stuff is starting to brew on. It's been brewing for a long time on amateur radio, and there's definitely some strange folks on the band. Recently, there's been a lot of buzz about a story out of California where supposedly Cal Fire, which is the state's fire authority, they handle fire protection in the unincorporated areas and some of the non-federal forest lands and stuff like that. There's a conspiracy theory out there that says that, according to Cal Fire and according to the state of California, that amateur radio is no longer necessary as an emergency communications source. And this is... It turns out what happened in this case was that there was a repeater owner in California who had their equipment at a Cal Fire, at a state of California managed site. And what the state of California is doing is that they're looking at all the occupants at their radio sites to see if those facilities are part of an emergency operations, an emergency response plan. And for those facilities that are not, the property management department of the state of California has basically stated that these facilities are going to have to pay commercial rates. So what's happening is that we're seeing a lot of this kind of nonsense going on right now. The original video is the second one there from K6UDA in regards to this going on. Now, of course, if you take a look at the thumbnail, the state of California with a K, okay, and then you look at the other related videos that have come up about this. The video from Gun Guy TV, the third video down, which talks about 4 weeks of food for $167. And then you've got the guy at the bottom with the straight pride flag. So yes, this is nothing more than a conspiracy theory circulating within the alt-right and prepper movements. This is an alt-right prepper thing, nothing more. Jim Temstra, I guess, K6JAT, ARRL Pacific Division Director, had stated, and this is on the ARRL Sacramento Valley website, Sacramento Valley Division website. The state of California has not made any determination we can find that, quote, ham radio is no longer a benefit. What happened is that CAL FIRE has transferred responsibility for its communication sites for its property management to its property management department. That department has the task of evaluating each site, its function, of its condition, use, and tenants. If a repeater is not known to be associated with an emergency management function of a local jurisdiction, is found in a CAL FIRE vault, the default action is to move it out or subject it to commercial rental rates. Our contact in the California Office of Emergency Services suggests that if any affected repeater is in any way involved with local emergency or government support activity, they should request that agency to engage with CAL FIRE concerning the repeater. If the agency makes the case, there is good chance that the repeater will be unaffected. Their advice is not to elevate this to state legislators or the governor's office. In Southern California, wherein sites are managed by the U.S. Forest Service, have required repeater owners to post bonds to cover the dismantling of their sites if they cease operations. Negotiation has resulted in considerable easing of the original requirements and a modification of terms to help mitigate the short-term financial impacts on those repeater owners. And that's Jim Temstra, K6JAT, ARRL Pacific Division Director. So, what we're seeing up here, again, it's alt-right conspiracy theory. That's all this is. These are people who hate the governor, who hate Governor Newsom, and they just want us, and so, they're basically, and I admit, keep in mind, I am mainly a centric person where it comes politically, and I don't bring politics into REC. But there's been a lot of disapproval over some of the things that state of California, some of the laws that state of California has passed recently. And yeah, California has passed some really crazy laws lately. I have to admit it, as somebody who does sit right about the, just a little bit to the left of center, I am really amazed. And, when I was out in Malibu last June and had my first taste of a paper straw, actually probably my first taste of a paper straw in 40 years, it's like, ugh! So that's where we're at. If anybody else has any chat items, any questions or anything like that, let's go ahead and drop those into the chat right now. If you have any comments, feel free to drop them in the chat. We can address them. Whatever's on your mind, let's address it. you know, this is a golden chance to talk to the Michi, and we want to make sure that any questions or anything like that can be answered here. And so, anyway, so other than that, again, we have, as of right now, 158 out of 186 renewals that have been filed for Florida, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. We are now currently at Georgia and Alabama. If you have an LPFM station in those regions, then please, by all means, feel free to, you can file your renewal now. If you want to use the REC Easy form, feel free to use that at recnet.com. Click on the Easy form link up there. If you have already, if you're already going to have REC file for you, we will be filing the renewals after November 17th. We always file on the 17th of the final month before the expiration or sometime after that. So that way you get all 4 of your public announcements out there. And then that way we can start that process. So that's pretty much where we're at on that. After Alabama and Georgia, it's going to be Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. That will be coming up in that's filing on that's going to start happening on December 1st, and your pre-file announcements will run on in December and January, with your post files in February, March, and April. Okay, Joy is asking about what's up with Channel 6. Well, there hasn't been much movement on Channel 6. Channel 6 is going to be further discussed in the MB Docket 19193 because of the complexities of the issues, including the Channel 6 controversy. I did ask for a 2-week extension of the deadline on that. The FCC normally will give a, sometimes the FCC will give these extensions, and it's very likely that they're going to give us a 1-week extension, and if that's the case, that is acceptable. I've noticed with the FCC is you ask big, you get some. You ask small, you get nothing at all. Just my own experiences dealing with the FCC. They already know that this request is in, and I'm hoping that we will hear back on that here eventually. And just checking to see, make sure there isn't anything else there that is brewing. But again, not much movement on Channel 6. We're still waiting for. It'll be interesting to see what the Franken FM industry comes up with in their comments in 19193. Yeah, the FCC has not released any documents yet of any kind today. I have not gotten any emails back from staff, either granting or denying this extension of time. Once I get it, it will go out on the social media channels. Make sure that you're following us on Facebook at facebook.com/RECNET. Please subscribe to this channel. Please. More subscribers we get, the more good things we get. And that's where we're at. So if we have no other questions, going once, going twice. We're having fun. We are having fun. And with that, then I guess we're done for another week here. Again, we'll see here next Friday. Actually, we'll be on Facebook Live next Friday, and we'll be on there on Facebook Live next Friday. Joey's worried about WNYZ. I assume that's the Franken FM that's in New York City. July, I think it's July 21st, 2021, or July 11th, 2021. Sometime in summer of 2021 is the analog sunset date. On that date, all analog low power TV and Class A TV has to go off the air. Unless the FCC has already given extensions on this already. I don't see them giving another extension on it. So the question, of course, is will the Franken FMs be allowed to operate a hybrid format where they have a digital carrier over most of their 6 megahertz, and then the very upper half of that, the small upper chunk of that is an analog carrier being inserted in for FM to be heard on an FM radio. REC opposes this because radio, radio is radio, television is television. Television is not radio, and radio is not television. So, this is from, the full service industry is against this because it is an unjust competition. These low power TV stations are not subject to the same ownership rules. They're not subject to the same public service rules that a full service station is required to, and in some cases they are operating at very high power because they are broadcasting from a mountaintop. And if they're running an audio carrier, if they're running a full audio carrier, then at the powers that are suggested. We have a case going right now in Los Angeles with Venture Technologies, which runs a Franken FM on Mount Wilson in Southern California. And they just recently made some modifications there, and they are claiming a 3,000 watt, 3 kilowatt, which is really the maximum for low power TV. And the non-com on 88.1 out in Long Beach has filed an informal objection against this modification because 3,000 watts on Mount Wilson is going to be a very, very powerful facility because of the height above average terrain, and it will pretty much compete with Class B stations in that area, Bs and B1 stations in that area. And because you've got a carrier that's on like 87.8, 87.75, 87.8, and and you've got 88.1, I mean, that's less than a second adjacent channel. So yeah, and this is the issues that we're going to be running into. This is some of the issues that the Franken FM industry are going to bring up, is that they're going to demand that stations on, at least secondary stations on co-channel and first adjacent and second adjacent and third adjacent and such are going to there's still going to be this pressure to have them be able to protect the Franken FMs. Now, of course, they don't have to, the primaries don't have to protect them because the primaries are primary and these Franken FMs are secondary. And that's one of the reasons why 88.1 is rightfully raising a fit here, is because of the fact that 88.1 is is primary, and yeah, they are concerned about the interference. Now, of course, we can go back and talk about second adjacent interference. We can talk about third adjacent interference, which the rest of the world, except for North America, recognizes as some kind of a threat. That's another issue we've talked about, is third adjacent channel. I don't see the Franken FM industry being able to get this hybrid stuff. And content does not sway me in positions. And I've had this happen to me before. when I have filed against an LPFM because their board of directors were all 40 miles away. Oh, but the station is going to do all these great things for the community. No. That's great and fine and dandy. We want them to do things for their community. But they're not above the law. Same goes here. If they're filling a niche, but they're not doing it on a service it's not that it, that service wasn't intended for that niche for that kind of service, then they're in the wrong place. My understanding is that the station there is also being simulcast on AM, and the AM would be the place for it to go. And of course, there's always HD. HD is an option, and I would like to see more options. One of the things we've talked about in the past is alternate spectrum. We've talked about the 11 meter band in the past. 11 meters is still an option, I feel like. It's just we have not been able to get this out, mainly just because of funding issues and other things. And we're also waiting right now for a more friendly commission. Right now with Ajit Pai and Michael R. O'Reilly, right now proposing some kind of new service that would address the ethnic diversity of places like New York City and the resulting pirate radio activity that has taken place because of some of the ethnic diversity. That's just not a popular decision right now, especially with Pai and O'Reilly still on the commission. Right now, O'Reilly has been an impediment to LPFM. In some ways, I feel like, although he has not made any direct statements, I feel like he does equate LPFM with pirate radio. In 1903, he was very quiet on the 1903 changes where it came to LPFM. And but we have champions right now with Jessica Rosenworcel and Kenneth Starks. Those are our two champions right now, and those are the two that we are trying to work very closely with. Now, keep in mind, I do have a good relationship with Pai's staff. I feel like Pai is kind of on the fence on these things, but I think in the long run, he will go with his partners in the majority on various issues. Now, also for the record, I do support the Pirate Act. I do support the Pirate Act as long as there are provisions and tolerances and empowerments to the Commission to only go after the egregious cases of radio piracy. And I'm talking about the 3 kilowatt stations in New York City that have antennas right on the roofs of apartment buildings. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Joe Hobbyist who accidentally puts a 50-foot wire on his Hamilton Rangemaster and is maybe getting out 2 miles instead of 1 mile or a mile and a half on his little low-power AM transmitter. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. Go after the egregious problems. Go after the ones that are actually interfering. The high-powered pirates that are interfering. The ones that are using language on the air that other stations are not allowed to use and shouldn't use. Those are the folks that the Pirate Act needs to go after. And I will support the Pirate Act in those cases. The last text of the Pirate Act that I saw did specifically state in there that stations that were not Part 15, stations that are Part 15 that are able to get into the Part 15 are not. That's not who this law covers. And so we just want to make sure that there's no, that there's none of that. I also oppose any state laws regarding pirate radio. I do not feel that the state is qualified to set those standards. And some states, such as the state of New York's law, doesn't even have specific standards. The Florida law does cross-reference into Section 301 of the Communications Act. So basically, the state law says if the FCC finds that you're running that you're pirating, then you're also violating state law too. I'm still against those kinds of laws because I feel like there's a jurisdiction issue. But at least in that law, there is a definition. So that's where we're at. All right, with that, unless anybody else has any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to jump on out of here. We are about a few minutes over. Anyway, again, we'll see you here next Friday, and we'll be on Facebook Live instead of YouTube. But please still subscribe to the channel. We'd love your support. If you need any work done, there's recnet.com, 1-844-REC-LPFM, or you can call 202-621-2355. But that's how you get a hold of us. LPFM at recnet.com for emails. Use the contact REC link on the website. A lot of ways to get a hold of us if you need anything done. Need something looked at. Need an opinion. You need your underwriting script evaluated by a neutral third party. I'll do that for you. And the best part about it is I don't charge for that kind. Some of those things I don't charge for. And I do ask for donations. But, if you need advice at REC, the advice is free. And if you feel it's worth more, then you donate. That's how we work here. If you need actual physical filing work done and stuff like that, yeah, then we charge. All right, so that's it for this week. And again, we'll see you again next Friday at Facebook. And for now, thank you, sayonara, and we'll see you soon.